Welcome. Okay, I see a couple of familiar names. Today we are going to zoom in on our Padnos Rooftop sculpture garden, and to get, as people are starting to come on, I'd like to talk a little bit about the function of Zoom. So for you to chat, which we'll ask you to do, we'll have a few questions for you. At least for me, on the bottom of my screen, when I move my mouse, there is a chat button. And when you click on that chat button, you can see there's a spot for you to choose all panelists or all panelists and attendees. It's really nice if you're able to click on all panelists and attendees, and then everybody can see what your questions you have or what you're wondering and things like that. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Amber Oudsma. I'm the curator of arts education, and you can see Eve Choi over there. She is the curator of horticulture and environmental education. Did I get that right?
Oh, yes. It's
a
bit of a long title.
Well, and now Carly Fournier is joining us, and I'm going to let her tell you what her title is because it's even longer.
Hi, Carly. You're on mute.
Carly.
All right.
Can I?
Oh,
there you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, I am the Classroom Activities and Education Technology Coordinator at Meijer Gardens, and we are excited today to talk with you a little bit about our Padnos Rooftop Sculpture Garden. So it's really nice to be able to have our curator of arts education as well as our curator of horticulture and environmental education. So what we would like you to do first today is we are going to ask you to, as Amber said, look closely, think deeply, and ask questions today. So you're going to have a couple different views. We're going to switch between the three of us, and we're going to look at the rooftop live, which is exciting. I'm up here right now. So we're going to look at the structure and the plantings there, and Eve's going to tell us a lot more about that. And then we're going to take a look at some of the sculptures. So first of all, what I'd love to have you do is I'm going to give you a viewpoint. I'm going to walk around the Padnos Rooftop Sculpture Garden, and I'm going to ask you just to type in the chat what you see. So any observations, go ahead and just type them in. It's a really beautiful day today. Anybody have any observations? What are you seeing up here? Sculptures. A few sculptures, some green plants, some brown plants. Looks like it would be beautiful in full bloom, says Shelley. I'm gonna come to the edge over here. What else do you see? Can't really tell it's a roof until I get over here. Nice walkway, easy to navigate, lots of spaces. What are you wondering about? What are you thinking? What questions do you have about this space? Does anybody have any questions? How about, oh, hi, Shelly. Wondering what the sounds are from the rooftop, says William. Shelly, you are not the only one on this Zoom call, but you are maybe a little less shy. That's okay. Sometimes it takes some time to type in the chat. We also have folks joining us from Facebook Live. I don't know if you can hear the sound, but the rooftop definitely makes a sound, and these are just a tad wiggly. So I don't know if you have any questions about the design or the materials.
I don't know. Carly, maybe one question. What do you think can we maybe see what's under those pavers?
Yeah. Let me come over here because I have one lifted already. So they are not fixed, and you can actually lift them up. And Eve is going to tell us some more of the reasoning behind that. But this one's already currently lifted, and I'll kind of get a little bit closer so you can see what's underneath. There's definitely some space there and another layer. So now that we've had a chance to look and wonder, I'll turn it over to Eve, and Eve can tell you a little bit more about the structure and the function of this rooftop garden.
Yes. All right, thank you again. My name is Eve Choi, and I'm the curator of horticultural and environmental education at Meijer Gardens. And I'm excited to have you joining us today as we're taking a closer look at the Padnos Rooftop Sculpture Garden. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the design of the roof itself, and Amber's going to be pulling up some pictures. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how, I guess, where it started, the design process. We're going to take a closer look at the structure of the roof, and we're going to talk about some of the benefits that not only this beautiful sculpture garden, rooftop sculpture garden, provides to Meijer Gardens building, but also the environment as well. Now, Meijer Gardens, we were always interested in incorporating a live roof somehow. There's actually other portions of our building that were originally designed with the idea of housing live roofs. Things didn't pan out logistically with those locations, but we were very excited to take that idea and bring it into its full realization with the Padnos Rooftop Sculpture Garden. It opened in the spring of 2019, but planning for this began more than 2 years earlier, with staff traveling to visit other rooftop gardens in the Grand Rapids area in Chicago. And as you can look, the design, it was designed by Progressive A&E and Meijer Gardens staff, and careful thought was put towards the sight lines, again, directing your view throughout the garden and then out over the natural environment beyond. Did anybody see in the chat what was beyond the roof? When Carly was showing us and we were sharing some observations, what was beyond the roof? We can't quite see it in this picture. Water, Shelley saw water. Amber, could you move to the next slide? Oh, next one. Move to the series of 3 pictures. Yes, so this water, it was beautiful. One more.
Oh, there's a video.
Oh. But as you saw, yes, there was water. We looked out on the wetlands. And so this actually gives you some cool before and after photos about how this roof was designed and custom grown for this rooftop sculpture garden. But the sight lines, as it was being designed, directs your view not only throughout the garden, but that also out to those wetlands beyond. As you look, you can see kind of the tan plant material going through the center of the picture in your top right-hand corner. We have a river of grass flowing throughout the center of the garden, and that sightline not only provides some really beautiful interest throughout the center of the rooftop garden, but also helps provide some continuity for the perennial plantings in that space. The rooftop sculpture garden, the garden portion, that consists of live roof modules, and those were custom grown in the shape of the installation over the summer of 2018. And then it was installed in the rooftop so that it was instantly mature at installation in the fall of 2018. And then we opened the rooftop garden to the public in the spring. And for those of us on Zoom, I'm wondering, can you raise your hand if you have visited the rooftop sculpture garden in person? Has anybody raised? So you can raise your hand or type in the chat.
I see Lori Hankinson has been. Oops, I'm moving this forward.
Awesome. And actually, I'd love to talk more about what is the structure, what's kind of the design behind these this rooftop sculpture garden. So you can see that these modules that house the plant material, we have two different types that compose this roof. There's a standard module, and then there's a deeper module. So I want you guys to take a look and share what are the key differences that you see between these two types of modules that make up the structure of the garden. So what are some differences that you see? And share that in the chat. I know I see one is about 4 inches deep, and the other, growing medium, that live roof engineered soil, is deeper in the live roof deep module versus the standard. What do you think is the benefit of having some of those modules that maybe have more shallow soil or shallow growing medium versus others that might have deeper? Yes, so soil level, for which Lori says soil level, for which plants are selected to plant in those areas. You see a lot of different plant materials. If we spotlight back to Carly, that's exactly right. So these different types of modules, it supports different plant materials. So, all right. And as we look, we've got sedums. Carly's showing us some sedums. In the chat, what do you know about sedums? We've got a lot of sedums on this roof, and that comes into play with the design of those modules. What do we know about sedums? As we get closer.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely nothing. That's all right. Lori says short roots, drier needs. They have really thick leaves that store a lot of water. So those succulents, that standard, more shallow module, it can grow those succulents. It's suited for those sedums in that area because the sedums, how their structures allow them to store water more readily with those thick leaves. They don't need as much water. They have, Lori mentioned, drier needs. And so with this in mind, we have the shallower soil, the shallower modules that are able to support the sedums. Now, look at some of the other plant material. We have other plant material outside of sedums. What do you think might support the different types of plant material based on what we've seen? What plant material do you see right now? I see some goldenrod walking around. So these perennials that we're seeing, they need a deeper soil bed to be able to grow. So having let's move back to the PowerPoint. As Carly is showing us, the sedums, they thrive in that standard module, the shallower soil. And then we also have that deep module that allows us to grow more perennials. The perennials in this space are cultivars of native species. So again, to increase that biodiversity, the types of plants that can be found and grow in this area. So, all right.
Okay, I just want to note, Eve, that I was missing a step. So we are now live on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those of you on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. We were just taking a look at the rooftop sculpture garden, and we were looking at some of the different plant material. So Amber, as you pull up the PowerPoint, we saw that this roof, it's created of these modules that have different types of growing material that's better for the live roof standard module, that's better for those sedums that you see on the rooftop. The sedums, they store water really well. They flourish in drier conditions. But then we also have this live roof deep module where the growing medium is deeper. It allows us to grow more perennials, and also sedums need a fair amount of sunlight. They need a lot of sunlight. So this deep module 2 allows you to grow plants in shadier locations at where the sedums might not do as well in that space. So let's move to the next slide. So we talked a little bit about what the live roof, and just in general, a green roof has a basic structure where we have a layer of vegetation that's planted over some sort of waterproofing system, and then a layer that helps protect the roof from the growth of roots, and then also some other insulation. There's lots of layers that are included, and so you have that vegetation layer over a waterproofing layer that also protects from the roots, and then on top of a flat or slightly sloped roof. That's the basic structure of these green roofs, and our rooftop garden follows that same model. And now we've made some observations. We've talked about some different plants we can grow on our rooftop because of its design, its structure. Now, I would like in the chat, what do you think are some benefits to having a living rooftop or a green roof or a rooftop garden? What are some benefits? And what you can do, you can either, if you're joining us on Zoom, you can type in the chat. Otherwise, if you're on Facebook, you can feel free to type in your messages on Facebook, and then Erin will be sharing those with us on Zoom. So if you're on Facebook, be sure to share those as well. So Shelley says a beautiful place to go when you don't have a backyard space. So that aesthetic beauty, providing a more natural landscape in an area that might typically house just a conventional roof. Diana says conservation, absolutely. We talked a little bit, Tom says less insulation is needed. Talking about conservation, we can look at that in a couple different ways. It helps us conserve energy. These live roofs help reduce energy use by, again, cooling roofs and providing shading and insulation. And then also, if we talk about conservation, promoting biodiversity, look at all of the variety of plant life. In our rooftop garden, we look at the plant material in kind of 3 layers. We have those trees that you see. We have those perennials. You see the goldenrod and the grass, and then we have the low-growing sedums. And that plant diversity would only be able to grow in this place with a green roof. So incorporating diversity. Catherine says better for bees and insects. Absolutely, providing not only a good source of habitat, but food availability. We've had rabbits find their way up to the rooftop garden. We've had ducks nest in the rooftop garden. Birds can be found eating from the serviceberry trees. So lots of support for natural water wildlife. Evan says prevents runoff. Absolutely. So we talk a lot about stormwater runoff and what we do at Meijer Gardens to help control that. So in many different ways, we act to cool, slow down, and filter stormwater runoff. And stormwater runoff is just water that it's precipitation that when it hits the surface doesn't seep into the ground. So you think rain hitting a pavement, immediately flows, doesn't seep into the ground at that point. So we do a lot of things to manage stormwater runoff, and this rooftop garden is a key part of that. Paved surfaces and constructed surfaces keep stormwater from being absorbed in the ground, and that excess runoff can actually sweep pollutants into water bodies. So with this roof, it reduces stormwater flow. Green roofs in general, some statistics have shown that incorporating a green roof can reduce stormwater flow off a roof by up to 65%, but then also delay that flow rate. So a lot of benefits as the plant material and the roof kind of acts as a sponge to slow down that flow, absorb that runoff, and then filter it and cool it. I saw someone mentioned cooling. An interesting note, you hear this term, the urban heat island effect. And green roofs are used a lot to combat that. And what the urban heat island effect refers to is that cities in general are warmer than other areas. Give me 1 second. As part of our green infrastructure, we have sensor lights, so I need to move around. I apologize for that. So so cities are generally warmer than other areas. So things like surfaces like concrete and asphalt absorb and reemit the sun's heat more than natural landscapes like forests and water bodies. So with daytime temperatures in cities can be 1 to 7 degrees higher than temperatures in surrounding areas. And actually a green roof, if you were to compare the temperature on a green roof compared to a conventional roof, they can be 30 to 40 degrees cooler than a conventional roof. So when you're talking about cooling down and combating that urban heat island effect, they can be very effective. All right. So as we've talked about not only the beauty, the design, and how that promotes biodiversity, that aesthetic quality that rooftop gardens can provide, it also, our rooftop sculpture garden these gardens provide the setting for many different sculptures. And Amber is going to highlight a few of those for us today.
Thanks, Eve. I'm actually going to stop screen sharing so that we can highlight Carly. And can you highlight Carly, Eve? There we go. So Carly is showing us, so one of the beautiful things, like Eve said, is that This space was designed with sculpture in mind. So we have all the beautiful plantings, we have all the many benefits of the way that it is constructed, and then we also have the ability to highlight 4 different sculptures. Right now we are lucky enough to have a few sculptures on loan from the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Park in Washington, D.C., part of the Smithsonian grouping of museums. And the piece that we're looking at now, actually I can say all 4 pieces are pieces of modern artwork, which goes really nicely because our collection is modern and contemporary. So what that means is modernism starts around the turn of the century, the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and they're influenced by the Industrial Revolution, and then later on, as we're seeing, definitely influenced by World War II and what's going on in the world. So this piece is by Marino Marini. He was an Italian artist, and it's just called Horse and Rider. And I'd like to start out with the question of, what do you see? So as Carly is moving around this piece, just take a second to look and mention what you notice. Shelley says she sees a horse and a rider. Very good observation, yes. That is basically what they are. Now then, what is going on with this horse and what is going on with this rider? Lori said she was wondering how the trees are planted for success. And I'll let Eve answer that.
Yeah,
Lori?
maybe we can come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We see a skinny horse.
Lori is noticing there that this is a skinny horse. What makes you say that, Lori? And from Facebook, Judy says she sees exuberance. I'm wondering what makes you say that, Judy?
Catherine says that maybe the rider is praising the sun. Ribs are showing.
Laura's noticed the ribs are showing on that horse. So that is what's making it skinny. Maybe it has not eaten well enough. So a person with arms outstretched to the sky on the horse. Kylie says maybe the rider is going to fall off. Yes, it looks a little precarious, doesn't it?
Does anybody have any questions? What are you wondering about the sculpture? One thing I wonder when I see this sculpture is, where's the saddle? Where are the reins?
Yeah, I have gone horseback riding a few times, and I always have those things. All right, I think I'm going to go back to sharing the PowerPoint. And then I will ask if Eve or Carly, you can let me know what the chat is saying. Oops.
Yep, sure will.
Let me. There we go. I wanted to bring it to this image because we have a Marino Marini horse and rider from 1937. And these are pretty different. I mean, the subject matter is the same. We have a horse and a rider. But I'm wondering if you can share in your chat, how do these look different?
Catherine from Facebook says, why are the horse's legs so outstretched as if on their last walk?
Good question.
And Lori is wondering, maybe the horse and rider were injured.
Mm. It's definitely a dramatic pose, right? Um, and sometimes, and a lot of times with a sculpture, at first glance, people do see exuberance and that those arms being upright, being very excited. But once you look a little closer, we see, like Lori had mentioned, the ribs. The horse is really skinny. It's not really natural for a horse to have its legs outstretched like that. So maybe something else is going on.
Does anybody else notice any differences between the two Marino Marini sculptures on the PowerPoint? Oh, Lori wonders, where's the tail and the mane? I'm assuming in the 1952 Horse and Rider.
Hmm. Although you can't really see the tail or the mane on the 1937 either.
True,
And
not in that photo.
by the way, that title, I don't really speak Italian, so I won't try to pronounce that, but that means horse and rider or man on a horse.
Oh, Anne also says on one side, the rider's foot looks backwards.
Ooh, that's a good observation. Yeah. That sounds pretty uncomfortable, right? Well, let me, okay, here's a question. What is happening? Marini is in Italy, but what is happening between 1937 and 1952 that might cause him to change his style?
In addition to that question too, Amber, Lori says that the 1937 Horse and Rider is sitting up straight but more relaxed.
Yeah, he looks a little more comfortable perhaps on that horse, right?
Right, which may also relate to your question of the time period. And Lori adds, and smiling.
There's a little more of a smile there.
I see Lori mentioned World War II.
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned that too. So that's what's changing. So let me give you a little bit of historical context. In Italy, before ancient Rome, there was a culture called the ancient Etruscans, and Marini was heavily influenced by their style. And I can tell you that there's a long tradition in the art world of sculptors sculpting horseback riders. And usually horses were used for the military. They would ride in on horses in battle. So usually when there is a sculpture made with a person who is in the military on horseback, that means they are victorious and they're somebody who is being honored. So while these two horses don't really look like, they're not full of armor or they're not in a march, there's still a reference to that idea of the horse and rider as someone from the military. The 1937 one is a man who looks fairly confident and comfortable, and he's influenced by the Etruscan horses and the style there. The horse looks confident and comfortable as well. And then World War II happens, and this horse and rider that we are borrowing from the Hirschhorn in the 1952 was created not quite as comfortable, a little more precarious. It's as if this horse, and notice that the neck is looking straight up on the horse. It's come to a full stop, even perhaps in the midst of a gallop. So I'm wondering now, and let me go back to Carly, I think, and as you walk around, I'm wondering if that changes anybody's ideas of this horse and rider and how the mood is, how this feels.
I'd also like to point out, if I can zoom in a little bit, you had mentioned that the ribs are showing on the horse and they're also showing on the figure of the rider. And I know that some people had commented on the foot. On the rider here, there's a part of the foot that appears to be missing on the right side. And then
Backwards.
on the left side, there's a little bit more detail, but there are no shoes.
Mm. I like this comment from Facebook. Anne said maybe the rider hadn't planned to ride this horse, or perhaps wasn't familiar with riding horses, and now is getting thrown off, perhaps. Lori Friedman said that it looks very tense now. There's a lot of dynamic, and I can tell you too that we can see that the tail has been chopped off actually here, because someone wondered that.
You can see the rider's face too. I don't know. Is that a good view, Amber? I'm reaching all the way up.
Yeah, it's a lot different from the 1937 Marini, right? So all those diagonal lines always indicate motion and sometimes chaos. All right. So this one I consider it's not like the most cheerful of subject matters, but it is something that definitely makes you think quite a bit. So and like when you first look at it, you might think, oh, looks like he's having lots of fun. Lori Friedman also said that maybe he's saying his last prayers at this point. So that's why he's facing upwards.
Kylie says stress.
Stress, yeah.
Shall we move on to a little bit more of a lighthearted one?
Yes, let's do.
All right, I'll head over to our last sculpture that we'll focus on today. And same thing, I love the conversation that we're having here. Go ahead and type in the chat what you're seeing with this sculpture. Very different from the last one, but what do you see?
As you walk around that, I'll mention you can kind of see in the background on the right a Henry Moore. This is a draped reclining figure, one of my favorite Henry Moores. So if you get a chance to come and check it out, please do. And then now behind Scott, this sculpture is David Smith's Cubi. I don't know which one in the series, 12, Cubi 12. Both just amazing pieces. So if you get a chance, come and check them out. But so as she is walking around this piece, what do you see? I'm not going to reveal the title just yet.
You can also type in the chat what you're wondering if you have any questions too, what you're thinking or wondering. So we'll combine all those thoughts. A bird, Lori says.
I like that.
What else does anybody see or wonder? It reminds Lori of a bird, an anchor, a plane. Another Lori says airplane. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can maybe tell what it's made from too.
Carly, can you also go kind of bring the camera low so you can kind of see it against the sky?
Oh, sure.
Upside legs, movement and abstraction. And I almost see a bird too. Well, that's a good spot actually, Carly, because you had just had the plaque showing. So this one's called this one's called Skyhooks by Alexander Calder. So also, while we're here, let me know if there's anything that you wonder about this piece.
Oh, Sue says it reminds her of yoga positions.
Nice.
I am gonna see the sculpture differently now with just that observation.
Yeah. Well, I like that one because it kind of references the geometry of the piece. And I think I'll share the PowerPoint again.
Jenny says wind.
Yeah. And let me go back. Oops. Here we go. So here are some examples of Alexander Calder's work. On the top, we have Le Grand Vitesse from downtown Grand Rapids. That's in 1969. On the right, we have Alexander Calder's Boomerangs from 1941. And he actually is the inventor of the mobile. So if you've ever had a mobile hung over a crib, that is thanks to Alexander Calder. And then he calls the pieces that are sturdy on the ground skyhook, or skyhooks is our sculpture, or the Hirschhorn sculpture, but stabiles. So you have the mobile and the stabile. So skyhooks is a stabile, and it's non-objective artwork, which means while everybody has something that it kind of reminds them of, it's not actually meant to look like anything in particular from nature. So Le Grand Vitesse that we see downtown, the title loosely translates to the Great Swiftness or Grand Rapids. So it kind of, even though it's not objective, it might recall kind of the flowing water of the Grand River. Well, with skyhooks, it's not necessarily meant to look like anything in particular, but I'm wondering with the title and the knowledge that this is not non-representational, if that changes how anybody feels about it, and or if there is a certain mood that you're getting from it, or if you're wondering anything about it. Eve, I'm curious if you have any interpretations since you're more Hort-minded.
I also would like to point out that Ye Yoon said it reminded them of a bird, a dinosaur, or a dolphin. And I like the reference with the sky with the bird. I know there were other folks that had mentioned that as well, but the dolphin too is interesting because I make associations with the blue sky and water. And then also there's a little bit of, I get a little bit of a tentacle vibe from the sculpture too. But it, in reference to Amber's question about the mood, thinking about the title and skyhooks and also looking at the color too, I think, does that change your interpretation or the feeling you get from the sculpture at all? Lori says the object seems strong, grounded, and proud.
Very interesting.
When I look at this sculpture, I always just see the contrast between the industrial materials and the vegetation and the plant life and the wetlands beyond. It's just a strong contrast for me.
Yeah. So, and that happens with the color as well, the black, and it's very geometric. So Alexander Calder was inspired by geometry, astronomy, kinetics, and play. So I think the title is very playful, and we see those sharp angles, which are usually really sharp geometric shapes, usually kind of feel cold and stiff. But in this instance, especially when you see it like it is in this image against the sky, it's like it's trying to reach for the sky or hook onto that bright blue color for me. And a lot of us know Alexander Calder works with that Calder red that Le Grand Vitesse is, which is a little bit more playful color. And in the, you can see in the Boomerangs image too, he likes to use bright colors. So reds, blacks, blues, yellows. And while black, we don't automatically think is this fun, playful color, I think that what you've mentioned in the contrast, especially in the midst of summer, of the black against the greens and the bright colors of the sedum, it really is, it catches your eye. And I think that's kind of what this piece in particular is meant to do. Did we have another chat?
And then, yeah, also Trisha says talons. And then I missed Catherine's from earlier. She says large shapes standing on points, sky hooks. I love the name. It makes me think of things in a bigger perspective.
I love that. Love that. So you can see, you know, Alexander Calder had been working through World War II and beyond, but in the 1960s, there's a shift in some artists' ideas of moving away from the horrors of war and into something a little more fun and playful, and using geometry and math kind of as inspiration. Is something that Calder really did. And one more thought I had on this, when I hear that he was inspired by astronomy, I especially like this piece because I think of those little rivets that we can see there as kind of spots in a constellation. And since it's black and it's usually paired against the sky, it kind of makes me think of perhaps the hooks are pointing at stars. Anything else anybody would like to add to that? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and Carly, I'll let you wrap it up.
All right. Thank you everybody for joining us today. If you registered on Zoom, you'll get an email. If you could please fill out the feedback form, we would love to get your feedback for future programming. And we hope you have a beautiful day. And if you get a chance, next time you're at Meijer Gardens, if you're able to come check out the Padnos Rooftop Sculpture Garden. Have a beautiful day.
Bye.
Oh, go ahead, Eve.
I was going to say also, Lori asked a good question about the trees and how we care for those. What I'll do is I'll connect with Erin on social media, and we'll put a little blurb about that in the comments on Facebook.
Oh, perfect. That's great. All right.
So didn't forget about you, Lori. Bye.
Bye.